I inherited my grandparents' estate. Now my sister wants it for free after years of criticizing it. Hi everyone! Today's story will blow your mind, but real quick, if you enjoy this content, hit that subscribe button. Channel's been a bit quiet lately, and your support keeps it all going. Let's jump in. I'm a 32-year-old man who inherited my grandparents' estate 3 years ago. My grandfather built the property in the 1960s, and it meant everything to him and my grandmother. The estate sits on 15 acres with gardens, a small lake, and a spacious Victorian-style home. It's not modern or trendy, but it has character and history that I've always cherished. My sister, Emily, 34F, has never shared my appreciation for our grandparents' estate. For years, she's referred to it as that old place, and made comments about how dated and stuffy it is. She'd roll her eyes whenever our grandparents invited us over for holidays, complaining about the musty smell and how the decor was straight out of a museum. Meanwhile, I spent summers helping my grandfather maintain the gardens and winters listening to my grandmother's stories about the house's history. When our grandparents passed away 2 years apart, I was genuinely surprised that they left the estate to me. The will was clear. They wanted me to have it because I'd shown interest in preserving it. Emily wasn't particularly bothered at the time. She received their investment portfolio, which was substantial, while I got the property. She made comments about how I got stuck with that maintenance nightmare, while she got actual money. I didn't mind. I loved the place and had already made plans to restore some of the original features while carefully updating others. For the past 3 years, I've poured my heart, soul, and a significant portion of my savings into restoring the estate. I replaced the plumbing, updated the electrical, restored the hardwood floors, and brought the gardens back to their former glory. I didn't modernize the character. I just made sure everything was functional and preserved the historical elements that made it special. I even converted part of the property into a small event venue that I rent out occasionally to help cover the substantial maintenance costs. Everything was going fine until last month when Emily got engaged to her boyfriend of 2 years, James. Suddenly, the estate she had spent years criticizing wasn't so old and dated anymore. It was now a charming and picturesque wedding venue that would be perfect for her special day. The issue arose yesterday when Emily, our parents, and a wedding planner showed up at my door unannounced. I was in the middle of a work call, I work remotely, when the doorbell rang repeatedly. When I opened the door, Emily breezed past me with the planner in tow, already pointing out where they could set up the ceremony and how they would arrange the reception. "The garden will need some work," she said, gesturing to the rose garden I'd spent 3 summers restoring. "And we'll need to remove some of this old furniture for the reception." I stood there, stunned, as our parents followed them in, smiling like this was the most normal thing in the world. "Wait," I said, finally finding my voice. "What's going on?" "Emily's wedding," my mother replied, looking at me like I was slow. "It's perfect here. We're just figuring out the logistics." The wedding planner was already measuring my living room, discussing where they could set up a dance floor after clearing out all this clutter. The clutter included my grandmother's antique writing desk that I'd carefully restored. "Nobody asked me if this was okay," I pointed out, trying to keep my tone level. Emily turned to me with a look of genuine confusion. "Why wouldn't it be okay? It's family property." "It's my property," I corrected her. "And I run an event venue here that people book months in advance and pay for." That's when things got tense. Emily's face hardened, and my parents exchanged glances. "You would charge your own sister to have her wedding here?" my father asked, his tone making it clear what answer he expected. "You can't be serious," Emily added. "After everything we've done for you." I couldn't recall exactly what they had done for me, especially regarding the estate that I had been maintaining entirely with my own resources. Before I could respond, the wedding planner was discussing removing a wall for better flow, a load-bearing wall, I might add. I finally had to be firm and ask them all to leave so we could discuss this properly another time. Emily left in tears, my mother wouldn't look at me, and my father muttered something about family obligations as they walked out. Now I'm being bombarded with texts from family members about how I'm being selfish and unreasonable. My parents are saying I'm trying to profit off my sister's special day, and Emily is telling everyone I'm trying to ruin her wedding because I'm jealous of her happiness. Am I wrong for not wanting to let my sister have her wedding for free at my property after years of her criticizing it, especially when she showed up without even asking me first and immediately started making plans to change things? Update. Setting boundaries. It's been about 2 weeks since my last post, and things have escalated in ways I didn't expect. First, thank you to everyone who offered support and advice. Reading your comments helped me realize I wasn't being unreasonable for wanting to set some boundaries. After taking a few days to calm down, I decided to approach the situation methodically. I called Emily and suggested we meet for coffee to discuss the wedding. She agreed, though her tone made it clear she expected me to apologize and give in to her demands. When we met, I laid out my position clearly. I told her I'd be happy to host her wedding at the estate, but there would be terms involved. 1. A reduced but still significant rental fee, about 60% of what I'd normally charge. 2. A security deposit to cover potential damages. 3. Adherence to the same contract all my clients sign, which includes restrictions on property alterations. 4. A clear timeline and schedule that wouldn't disrupt my other bookings. I explained that maintaining the estate costs thousands each month, and while I was willing to give her a substantial family discount, I couldn't offer it for free. I also emphasized that her wedding couldn't involve making permanent changes to the property or removing historical items. Emily's reaction was not great. She stared at me like I'd suggested she get married in a dumpster. "You're actually serious about charging me," she said flatly. "It wasn't a question. I'm serious about covering my costs," I clarified. "And protecting the property." She stood up so quickly her chair nearly toppled over. "This is unbelievable. That house should have been split between us anyway. Grandma and Grandpa obviously weren't thinking clearly when they made their will." That stung, but I kept my composure. "They made their decision, Emily. Just like they decided to give you their entire investment portfolio instead of splitting that with me." "That's different," she snapped. "You can't put a price on family, James." I didn't point out the irony that she was literally arguing about the price of using my property. Instead, I simply said, "I've made my offer. Let me know what you decide." I thought that would be the end of it, at least for a few days while she considered my terms. I was wrong. By the time I got home, my phone was flooded with messages. Emily had told our parents, who had told our aunts and uncles, who had told our cousins, and suddenly I was the villain in a family-wide drama. The narrative had somehow transformed into me extorting my sister on her wedding day. My mother called, her voice that special kind of calm that actually means she's furious. "Your grandfather would be so disappointed in you," she said. "This house was meant for family." "Yes," I agreed. "And I'm the family member who's responsible for it now." "Emily can't afford what you're asking," my mother continued, which I knew wasn't true. "Emily makes an excellent salary as a marketing executive, and she received our grandparents' substantial investments." "She can afford it," I said. "She just doesn't want to pay it." The conversation devolved from there, ending with my mother telling me to think long and hard about what kind of brother I want to be. 2 days later, I received a group email from Emily that had been sent to our entire extended family. It detailed how I was holding her dream wedding hostage, and included itemized breakdowns of what I was demanding versus what other venues charged. Of course, her breakdown conveniently ignored the fact that I was offering a significant discount and that my venue includes amenities others don't. What surprised me was the response from my cousin Thomas, who replied all, "Am I missing something here? James is offering you a massive discount on a premium venue that's usually booked solid months in advance. Most brothers would just say no altogether rather than risk their property. Take the deal or find somewhere else." That sparked a family email war that I quickly muted. But it was encouraging to see at least someone understood my position. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, yesterday I received a call from my father. His tone was conciliatory, which immediately made me suspicious. "Your mother and I have been thinking," he began. "We'd like to help Emily with the venue cost. We'll pay half if you'll reduce your price by half." It was the first reasonable proposal I'd heard, and I agreed to it on the spot. The new fee would still cover my costs and provide a small buffer for unexpected expenses. "Great," my father said, sounding relieved. "We'll let Emily know it's all sorted." I thought we'd finally reached a resolution. Then this morning, I received a contract from Emily's wedding planner with terms completely different from what I'd agreed to. The contract mentioned a nominal facility fee, about 10% of what we'd agreed on, unrestricted access to the property for 2 weeks before the wedding, permission to temporarily relocate certain furniture pieces, including priceless antiques, and nothing about a security deposit. I called my father immediately. "Oh," he said, sounding uncomfortable. "Emily thought this would work better for everyone." I didn't lose my temper. Instead, I simply said, "This isn't what we agreed to. Either we go with our original agreement, or Emily needs to find another venue." Now I'm back to being the villain. Emily is threatening to expose me on social media for ruining her wedding. My parents are saying I'm being rigid and uncompromising, and I've received several lengthy voicemails from relatives telling me how I'm destroying the family. I'm holding firm on my position, but I'll admit the constant pressure is wearing me down. I've started to document everything in writing and have consulted with my lawyer just to make sure I'm protected if this gets even uglier. The wedding is still 3 months away, so there's time for a resolution. But right now, it feels like this might permanently damage my relationship with my sister and possibly my parents. Update 2. Property damage and escalation. It's been a month since my last update, and things have gone from bad to worse. After standing my ground on the contract terms, I thought Emily had finally accepted the situation when she sent a terse email saying she would sign the original agreement. My parents would cover half the cost as discussed, and Emily would pay the other half plus the security deposit. I was relieved, if not particularly optimistic about our relationship moving forward. Emily signed the contract, though she did it with a theatrical flair, sending me a video of her signing it with an exaggerated sigh and saying, "I hope you're happy now." Childish, but I was just glad to have the agreement in writing. The trouble started last week when Emily showed up with her wedding planner and a small army of people she introduced as the decor team. I had approved a site visit in advance, but I was expecting maybe 3 people, not 8, and certainly not people carrying measuring tools and what looked like paint samples. "We're just getting some preliminary measurements," Emily explained with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I reminded her of the contract stipulations about alterations to the property, and she rolled her eyes. "Relax, James. We're not doing construction. We're just figuring out the space." I reluctantly let them proceed while I worked in my home office, checking in occasionally. Everything seemed fine, if a bit more invasive than I was comfortable with. They measured rooms, took photos, and discussed setups. The wedding planner was professional enough, constantly reminding Emily of what they could and couldn't do according to our agreement. After they left, I noticed a few things out of place but nothing concerning. I rearranged the furniture they'd moved and went about my evening. The next morning, I discovered the first sign of trouble. Someone had removed a section of the garden trellis, not just moved it, but completely detached it from the structure. This wasn't a small decorative piece, it was part of the original garden architecture that my grandfather had built. Next to it was a roughly sketched plan showing how they intended to replace it with a more modern entrance arch for the ceremony. I immediately called Emily, who claimed ignorance. "Maybe one of the decor people thought it was temporary," she suggested, not sounding particularly concerned. "We can put it back after the wedding." "That's not how this works, Emily. You can't just remove parts of the property without permission. It's just a trellis, James. It's not like we're tearing down walls." I reminded her of the contract terms and the security deposit that would now have to cover the repair. She hung up on me. Later that day, I received a call from someone claiming to be a renovation consultant who had been hired to update the venue space for the wedding. He was calling to schedule a time to look at removing the old wallpaper and updating the paint colors in the main hall. I immediately shut this down, explaining that no renovations were permitted and that any such work would constitute a breach of contract. The consultant seemed confused, saying he'd been specifically hired by the bride and had already purchased supplies. When I confronted Emily about this, she finally admitted that she'd been planning what she called minor refreshes to make the space more photogenic. "The wallpaper is ancient, James. It's going to look terrible in photos." "That ancient wallpaper is hand-painted and worth more than your entire wedding budget," I informed her. "It's not being touched." This led to another family blowout, with my parents calling to tell me I was being unnecessarily difficult and should compromise a little. I stood firm, pointing out that Emily had already violated the contract once by removing the trellis, and I wasn't going to allow further damage. 2 days later, I came home from grocery shopping to find a moving truck in my driveway and 3 men carrying out my grandmother's antique dining table, one of the centerpieces of the house and a family heirloom. I immediately blocked the door and demanded to know what was happening. They showed me a work order signed by Emily authorizing them to temporarily relocate certain furniture pieces to a storage facility until after the wedding. I sent them away and called Emily in a fury. She was unapologetic. "That table takes up too much space, and it doesn't match our color scheme. We were going to bring it back after the wedding." "You don't have the authority to remove anything from this house," I told her, barely keeping my temper in check. "This is the last straw, Emily. Consider the contract voided. Find another venue." The fallout was nuclear. Emily showed up at my door an hour later, screaming about how I was ruining everything. My parents weren't far behind, with my father threatening to take this to court, on what grounds, I have no idea, and my mother in tears about how I was destroying the family. I remained calm and pointed out each breach of contract, showing them the damaged trellis and the work order for the unauthorized furniture removal. I informed them that according to the terms Emily had signed, these actions constituted grounds for cancellation, and I was exercising that right. "But the invitations have already gone out," Emily wailed. Everyone knows it's happening here. That's not my problem, I replied. You should have thought about that before you started removing parts of my house. My father tried to negotiate, offering to pay for any damages and promising to supervise Emily going forward. But I'd had enough. The trust was broken, and I was no longer comfortable having the wedding on my property. As they left, Emily turned and said something that honestly shocked me. You've always been jealous that Grandpa loved me more. That's why you're doing this. It was so wildly untrue that I couldn't even formulate a response. Our grandfather had loved us both, but Emily had barely visited him in his final years while I had been there regularly. The comment felt deliberately designed to hurt me, and it worked. After they left, I called my lawyer to make sure I was legally protected in canceling the contract. He confirmed that the documented breaches gave me clear grounds and advised me to return Emily's deposit in full to avoid any complications. I did so immediately, sending her an email with the cancellation notice and proof of the refund transfer. I also changed the gate code to the property and installed security cameras at the main entrance points, a precaution my lawyer suggested given how heated things had become. This morning, I woke up to dozens of messages from family members and even some of Emily's friends, all varying degrees of angry and disappointed. Apparently, Emily has told everyone that I cancelled on a whim, just to hurt her, with no mention of the contract violations or property damage. I'm not responding to any of them. My cousin Thomas called to check in, and after hearing the full story, he's firmly on my side. He suggested I document everything carefully in case Emily tries to escalate further. I'm taking his advice. As it stands now, Emily and my parents are no longer speaking to me, which honestly feels like a relief given how stressful the last month has been. The wedding is now about 6 weeks away, and as far as I know, they're scrambling to find a new venue. Part of me feels guilty about that, but a larger part knows I made the right decision to protect my home. Update 3. Wedding Day Drama and Unexpected Allies. It's been 6 weeks since my last update, and today was supposed to be Emily's wedding day. I say, supposed to be, because things didn't exactly go according to her original plan, though they went even worse than I expected. After I canceled the contract, Emily and my parents apparently spent weeks trying to find a replacement venue. According to my cousin Thomas, who's been my main source of family news, they struggled to find anywhere suitable on such short notice, especially since they were looking for something comparable to my estate without wanting to pay premium prices. Eventually, they settled on a country club about an hour outside the city. It wasn't what Emily had envisioned, but it was available and within their budget after my parents agreed to contribute more than originally planned. I thought that was the end of my involvement. I was wrong. 3 days ago, I received a call from an unknown number. It was James, Emily's fiancé. This was surprising because we'd never been particularly close, and I hadn't heard from him at all during this entire ordeal. "Can we meet for a beer?" he asked, sounding tense. "There's something you should know." I agreed, more out of curiosity than anything else, and we met at a quiet bar near my place that evening. James looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy about him. After some awkward small talk, he got to the point. "Emily and your parents are planning to show up at your place tomorrow for photos," he said, staring intently at his beer. "They didn't tell me until yesterday. Apparently, Emily still wants the garden as her backdrop, even though the ceremony is happening at the country club." I was stunned. "They're planning to trespass on my property? After everything that's happened?" James nodded uncomfortably. "Emily says it's still family property and you can't stop them from visiting. They're planning to arrive around noon, before heading to the country club for the actual ceremony. And you're telling me this because—" He looked up. "Because it's wrong. This whole thing has been wrong. The way they've treated you, the way Emily tried to take over your home, it's not right. And I'm starting to wonder what I'm getting myself into." That last part caught me off guard. It sounded like pre-wedding jitters mixed with genuine concern. I thanked him for the heads up and assured him I'd handle it. As we parted ways, he hesitated. "For what it's worth, I think what you did with the place is amazing. My grandparents had a farm when I was growing up, and I would have loved to preserve it like you've done." That conversation left me with a lot to think about, but my immediate concern was preventing another confrontation at my property. I called my lawyer first thing the next morning, and he advised me to send a formal notice prohibiting them from entering the property, followed by notifying local police of potential trespassing. I did exactly that, sending an email to my parents and Emily, clearly stating they did not have permission to enter the property for wedding photos or any other purpose. I attached my lawyer's contact information and indicated that I had notified local authorities of potential trespassing. My mother called almost immediately, alternating between tears and anger. "How could you involve the police? We're your family." "I'm just protecting my property," I replied calmly. You and Emily have made it clear you don't respect my boundaries. It's just photos, James. 1 hour in the garden that you're so precious about. The garden our grandparents built for the whole family. The garden I restored after years of neglect, I corrected her. And it's not just about the garden. It's about respect. You don't have my permission to be here, period. The conversation ended with her telling me I was dead to her, harsh words that hurt more than I wanted to admit. I spent the rest of the day on edge, half expecting them to show up despite my warnings. I had a friend come over for moral support, and we kept an eye on the security cameras I'd installed. But noon came and went with no sign of them. Later that afternoon, I received a series of increasingly frantic texts from various family members. Apparently, Emily had had a complete meltdown at the country club when she realized I was serious about not allowing them on the property. According to my cousin Thomas, who was there, she screamed at the photographers, fired the wedding planner on the spot, and locked herself in the bridal suite, refusing to come out. The ceremony was delayed by over 2 hours while James and my parents tried to calm her down. When she finally emerged, she was clearly upset but determined to go through with the wedding. Thomas said the ceremony itself was awkward but went ahead, though Emily was visibly seething throughout. The reception that followed was described by Thomas as the most uncomfortable party I've ever attended. Emily apparently made several pointed remarks during her speech about family betrayal and selfishness, clearly directed at me though she never mentioned me by name. Several guests left early, uncomfortable with the obvious family tension. What happened next surprised me even more. This morning, I received an email from James. Attached were several photos of Emily, my parents, and the wedding party standing in front of my gates. They had come to the property after all, but hadn't attempted to enter. The photos showed them posed outside the closed gates, with the house visible in the background. James's email was brief: compromise solution. No trespassing occurred. For what it's worth, I tried to talk her out of even this. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't respond. I wasn't angry, exactly. They had technically stayed off my property, but the whole thing felt petty and sad. Using my locked gates as a photo backdrop seemed like a final attempt to make a point, though I wasn't entirely sure what that point was. A few hours later, Thomas called with the final piece of wedding gossip. Apparently, James and Emily had a huge fight at the hotel after the reception. No one knows exactly what was said, but multiple people overheard James questioning if they had made a mistake rushing into marriage. They still left for their honeymoon this morning as planned, but according to Thomas, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. I feel strangely detached from all of it now. The wedding is over, my property is intact, and I've had time to process my feelings about the whole situation. I'm sad about how things have unfolded with my family, but I'm also at peace with my decisions. I protected something important to me, and I refuse to be manipulated or bullied, even by the people who should have supported me the most. My parents haven't reached out since my mother's "dead to you" comment, and I'm giving that space for now. I suspect they're embarrassed about how everything played out but too proud to admit it. As for Emily and James, I'm genuinely curious about what happens next in their marriage. James's comments and actions suggest he's seeing a side of Emily and my parents that he hadn't fully recognized before. Whether that leads to lasting change or more conflict isn't my concern anymore. For now, I'm focusing on moving forward. The estate is thriving as a small event venue, and I've just been approved for a historical preservation grant that will help fund some of the more expensive restoration projects I've been postponing. Life goes on, with or without family drama. Final update: 6 months later. It's been a little over 6 months since Emily's wedding, and so much has changed that I felt it was time for a final update. The dust has settled, relationships have shifted, and I've gained some unexpected perspective on everything that happened. First, the most surprising development. James reached out to me about 2 months after the wedding. He asked if we could meet for coffee, saying he had something important to discuss. Given our last interaction, I was curious enough to agree. When we met, he looked better than he had before the wedding, less stressed, more at ease. He got straight to the point. "Emily and I are separating," he said. "It's been a long time coming, but the wedding drama was the final straw." I was stunned. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I hadn't wished for their marriage to fail. James shook his head. "Don't be. It was the right decision. The way she treated you, the way she disrespected your property, it made me see things clearly. When we got back from our honeymoon, I suggested counseling, but Emily refused. She's still convinced she did nothing wrong." He explained that the honeymoon had been tense, with multiple arguments about the wedding and family dynamics. When they returned, things only got worse. James said he realized he couldn't spend his life with someone who treated others, especially family, the way Emily had treated me. I keep thinking about my grandparents' farm, he added, echoing our conversation before the wedding. If I had inherited it and someone tried to do what Emily did to your place, I couldn't tolerate that level of disrespect. I was moved by his honesty and told him so. We ended up talking for nearly 3 hours, about everything from family pressures to preserving history to what we both wanted from life. It was the beginning of an unexpected friendship. As for Emily, she hasn't spoken to me directly since the wedding. According to James, she blames me entirely for their separation, telling anyone who will listen that I poisoned him against her. When news of their separation became public, she apparently told family members it was because James took my brother's side over mine. My parents' reaction to all of this has been complicated. About a month after the wedding, my father showed up at my door unannounced. He looked older somehow, more subdued than I'd seen him in years. "Can we talk?" he asked simply. We sat in the garden, the same garden Emily had wanted to use for her wedding photos, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I handled things badly," he admitted. "Your mother and I both did. We shouldn't have pressured you the way we did." It wasn't exactly a full apology, but from my father, it was significant. I listened as he explained how they'd gotten caught up in Emily's vision, how they'd always found it harder to say no to her than to me because I had always been the responsible one. "We took advantage of that," he said. "We expected you to give in because you usually do. That wasn't fair." We talked for over an hour, about the estate, about our grandparents, about the family dynamics that had led to the situation. He asked thoughtful questions about the renovations I'd done and seemed genuinely interested in the preservation work. As he was leaving, he mentioned that my mother wasn't ready to reach out yet, but he hoped that would change. "She took Emily's side in the separation," he explained. "She's convinced James was influenced by you, and she's having a hard time accepting that Emily might have been in the wrong." I appreciated his honesty and told him he was welcome to visit again. He has, several times now. Each visit has been a little less awkward than the last, and we're slowly rebuilding our relationship on new, more equal footing. My mother finally called about 2 months ago. The conversation was stiff, with her carefully avoiding any direct mention of the wedding or Emily's separation. But she asked about the estate and mentioned that she'd been thinking about her parents, my grandparents, a lot lately. "They would be proud of what you've done with the place," she said quietly before hanging up. It wasn't much, but it was something. As for the rest of the family, the drama has largely faded. Most relatives have either chosen sides and kept quiet about it, or decided it wasn't their business in the first place. Thomas remains a solid presence, visiting often and bringing his kids to see the family estate. He's become one of my staunchest supporters and a close friend. The most unexpected outcome has been my relationship with James. After our coffee meeting, we started hanging out regularly. He's genuinely interested in history and preservation, and he's been helping me with some of the more labor-intensive restoration projects on the property. He's even introduced me to his sister, who runs a small interior design firm specializing in historic properties, and she's provided valuable insights for some of the interior spaces I hadn't yet tackled. Emily, from what I understand, is living with our parents again and has been telling anyone who will listen that James and I conspired against her. Most people see through the narrative, but she's managed to maintain a small circle of supporters who view her as the victim in all of this. The estate itself is thriving. The historical preservation grant I mentioned in my last update came through, allowing me to restore the original stained glass in the main hall, a project that had been financially out of reach before. The event venue business has grown steadily, with bookings now extending well into next year. I've even hired staff to help manage it, giving me more time to focus on the restoration work that I truly love. Last month, I hosted a small family gathering to celebrate the completion of the garden restoration, the same garden that had been at the center of so much conflict. My father came, as did Thomas and his family, a few cousins, and, to everyone's surprise, my mother. She was quiet throughout most of the event, but as she was leaving, she paused to look at the trellis that Emily had damaged. "Your grandfather built that the summer before you were born," she said softly. "I had forgotten how beautiful it was." It was a small moment, but it felt like a beginning. James came to the gathering too, now accepted as a friend of the family despite his separation from Emily. The irony isn't lost on me. The wedding that was supposed to unite him with our family still did, just not in the way anyone expected. As I write this final update, I'm sitting in my grandfather's study, surrounded by the history he cherished and the legacy he entrusted to me. The path here wasn't what I expected, and the cost of family relationships was higher than I would have chosen. But I don't regret standing my ground. This estate isn't just property, it's a connection to the past and a commitment to the future. My grandparents understood that when they left it to me, and now, finally, I think some of my family is beginning to understand it too. Not Emily, perhaps. Not yet. But the door remains open, should she ever choose to walk through it with respect rather than entitlement. In the meantime, life goes on. The old house stands firm, as it has for generations, weathering storms both literal and familial. And I stand with it, honoring the trust that was placed in me and finding peace in the knowledge that I did what was right, for the estate, for my grandparents' legacy, and ultimately for myself.